Hello everyone, this is Brian Kelly from Association Mavens, where you get direct access to some of the foremost thinkers and teachers in the association industry. My guest today is David Nour. Welcome to Association Mavens, David.
Brian, thanks for having me.
So there's a lot of things that we could cover related to your recent book, Return on Impact. But let's start by talking about what the link is between your previous book, Relationship Economics, and Return on Impact. Tell us the story behind these.
So, Return on Impact is actually my fourth book. Relationship Economics was my first. And at some point, you feel like you've talked enough, you've thought enough, you've spoken enough, you've consulted enough about a topic, or you feel like you have something to say. In Relationship Economics, I talked about the quantifiable and strategic value of business relationships. Everybody gets that relationships are important. Very few really understand their significance. And more importantly, how do you bridge from relationship creation to capitalization? Well, you must have lived in a cave not to realize the impact of social and mobile on business relationships. So I've actually been thinking about this idea, not just LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, a lot of the tools, but how does it really impact the way organizations function? And more importantly, how do really visionary leaders start thinking about social and mobile, in essence, disruptive technologies, as a chance to think differently about their association, think differently about who they consider members, think differently about revenue models and growth models. I wrote the Return on Impact book in a month because, again, you start thinking about, and thanks to ASAE and the foundation, I was able to interview 100 association executives. I went back and interviewed 100 of my corporate executives, and it was a really good chance to share some of the ideas that are in there.
Excellent. So I've heard you describe Return on Impact as offering leadership strategies in the age of connected relationships. Can you explain a little bit exactly what this means?
Sure. So I think the business model of the 20th century, right, that which made us successful in the past probably isn't going to be that which makes us successful moving forward. And by that I mean in this age of 100 million tweets a day, there's no lack of information sharing. There's also a lot of literature out there that most of your audience doesn't believe your marketing or advertising. Mm-hmm. They believe their peers. They believe other association executives or other members or other people they can relate to, that they feel like the message hasn't been filtered by traditional marketing organizations. Combine that with this disruptive force of, like I said, social and mobile in particular, that not only gives us access to more information in real time, but access to opinions and the ability to compare and contrast features and functions and perspectives. This all creates a new age of very much connected relationships. So if your traditional marketing and your advertising doesn't work, and your websites are seen as really as a way for me to come and just grab some information, and I get a lot of what I need very different places, as I said earlier, how will you as an association executive start thinking and leading very differently than you may have in the past? That's the real essence of the Return Impact book. It's not a how to do social. It's really start how to lead differently because of social.
So you mentioned a little while ago kind of the premise for the book, or rather how you gathered the content for the book, was you interviewed 100 association executives. I'd love to explore that a little bit more with you, that experience, and is there anything that you can relay as a story or an anecdote from that process?
Sure.
That's worthwhile.
So kudos to, like I said, the ASAE Foundation, Monica Dingman and Keith Skillman, and a lot of those folks. They did a great job in what's called a Delphi model, which is they cast a very wide net to most, if not all, the ASA Association, that, hey, we're working on this project. If you're interested, reply here. And we had about 400 to 500 folks reply to an online survey. One of the questions was, would you be willing to discuss some of the things you're doing in a live interview. So a whole bunch said yes. Then we build a scorecard based on not just people that were doing tactical things, like as an association, do you have a Twitter page or 20 Twitter account and Facebook pages, and are you active on LinkedIn and YouTube? And a lot of those are yes, but are you using them strategically? Are they impacting your revenue model? Are they impacting your membership? And based on that scorecard, in essence, I came up with a top 100. And I interviewed, you think of very large, multi-million-dollar year budgets, huge staff, to a lot of small, state-level type organizations. Mm-hmm. And what I found, what they had in common was early signs that, again, they were thinking about social differently. So one of my favorites is Holly Ross over at N10. And Holly's doing some really interesting things, and in terms of monitoring, in terms of listening, not just using social as a personal billboard to share, look how great we are and look at all the great things that we do, but really as an opportunity to create dialogue and really create that interaction. And what I loved about Holly, and she was kind enough to share a lot of this, is she actually uses a spreadsheet, and I have some screenshots of it in the book, but she tracks where they came from, a potential prospective member, what's been, in essence, their behavior or their digital footprint, right? They came to the website, they downloaded something, they attended a webinar, and she's able to, through that behavior, track how to convert someone who just had simple, perhaps, interest to a member. Mm-hmm. And not only just a member, but an engaged member, and different levels of engagement. If you think about that conceptually, it's a very smart way to think about social as an enabler of her growth, social as an enabler of her product development, as an enabler of what Holly and her team really want the organization to become, not just what it is today. And that's really exemplary of, I talk about visionary leaders, association or otherwise, mm-hmm. who start to think about social and mobile very differently in terms of how to grow, how to scale, how to be a very different organization 3 years from now and 5 years from now than they are today.
No, I think it's good to hear that story, because some people may look at it as the associations that you interviewed for this, it was examining what they're doing wrong versus the things that they're doing right, or the things that are really making an impact. So it's good, to have that underscored.
Sure. No, and there are a lot of individuals, and I think that's both a challenge and an opportunity. There are a lot of very smart individuals, you and I know several of them, who are doing some really interesting stuff in pockets of associations or in the association community. The challenge is very few are really leading. There's a lot of fast followers. There are a lot of people that will do, hey, us too, and we do that too. Very few are really thinking differently, thinking strategically about mobile and social, and are leading differently. So I'm delighted that I found several, and you certainly find, like I said, the opportunity is now, how do we start doing that? ASA was kind enough to invite me to facilitate one of the executive breakfast series. And we had 60 some odd association executives show up in DC for a better part of a 2.5-hour session. The beautiful part was nobody left and nobody fell asleep, and there were a lot of great dialogue, because I think they all realized this is an impetus for start thinking and hopefully persuading the volunteer board of how do we start doing things differently. Absolutely.
Well, another concept I want to explore with you is the fact that you focused on this idea of social with a capital S as something more than just social networking, and also something that's more than social media. Can you talk a little bit about why and exactly what that means to you?
Sure. It was interesting. As I wrote the original manuscript, Keith Skillman and the editorial folks at the foundation came back and said, you're using social as a noun. Are you referring to media or networking? And I said, no, it really is that led to actually just defining social early on in the book. Yep. That social has to become more than networking. Social networking, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and by the way, some 400 different ones that we've researched in 22 different categories, is about having a presence. You and I have a Twitter account. that exemplifies, that illustrates an example of an online presence. A lot of organizations use social media. So not just the networks, but blogs and forums and discussion groups. And those are all examples of social media as a platform for dialogue, a platform for discussions, a platform for digital interactions, if you will. And those two are fine, and they work great for many in the tactical sense. If you elevate beyond those two, I talk a lot about social market leadership. And social market leadership is about a purpose. Not just what are you doing online, but why are you online? And more importantly, how are your relationships? How are your digital constituents, if you will, are better off because you're online? That takes on a whole different and often a more strategic approach to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Not just the fact that you have a Twitter account and you're tweeting about your upcoming event.
Right.
Does that make sense? Does that resonate?
Absolutely. So the next thing I'd love to explore with you a little bit is in the book you have this example of something called Sermo. And you kind of contrast that with the American Medical Association. What lessons can we learn from this? And maybe let's take a step back, and for those who aren't familiar with the book or its content, have you explained Sermo and kind of the dichotomy with AMA?
Yeah, so I've met Michael Maves, the president and CEO of American Medical Association. I respect him highly, think highly of the organization. But you got two fundamental challenges. There are over 1 million licensed physicians in the U.S. alone. Roughly about, and again, this is round numbers, roughly about 200,000 are AMA members. So 20% of the total addressable market. At some point, you got to start thinking, why is that? And do they not see value in AMA, or AMA doesn't recognize who they are or what they do or cater to what they do? Or there's got to be some sort of disconnect for any organization to have roughly 20%, again, of the total addressable market. And my supposition is there are now, I alluded to this earlier, what's made you successful in the past may or may not be what makes you successful moving forward. As a matter of fact, it actually could be one of the hindrances, right? So there are now organizations, there are now entities, there are now private organizations that are emerging with very unique business models that candidly look like associations, they sound like associations, they act like associations, but guess what? They don't charge any membership dues, and they have no annual conference, and they don't send me another magazine that happens to be the 50th on my desk that I can't even get to this month. Yep. And Sermo is one of those. It's the largest gathering of online physicians. And so think about it as Facebook for doctors. Right. And the idea is a very simple one, that they realize they simply don't have all the answers. So as a physician, can I go to a community of peers and put out a question and create dialogue and discussions around symptoms and diagnosis and just what's happening in the healthcare industry and physician groups getting acquired by hospitals and Obamacare and the healthcare reform and on and on and on. And the entire business model is really supported by those who are interested in those opinions. So Sermo, S-E-R-M-O, and I highlighted in the book, is really become the purveyor of those relationships, in essence, a facilitator of those interactions. Well, many would argue that associations began as the original social network. So why isn't Sermo an entity within AMA? Why isn't a Sermo a spinoff of AMA? So what and again, that's a very large, very established, we're talking about very mature association. Right. So my counsel to other association executives or people in the association industry that may be watching this, or anybody that hears me speak, is unless you, and that really is the gist of the book and the models that I've built in the book, unless you become, not incrementally, but dramatically focused on becoming an expert in all things your members, and in essence understanding a life cycle and catering what you do to each stages of that life cycle, I struggle to see you remain relevant and remain relevant in their minds, in their hearts, and in their future. So that's where the Sermo and the AMA example comes in.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a perfect illustration of some of the challenges that a lot of associations are facing, and really I think can help stimulate some creative solutions as associations try to figure out how to move these new directions or follow new business models. So in the book, you reference Porter's 5 forces, that particular model. So I want to have you talk a little bit about why, and also, what's changed since Porter developed this methodology, and is it still relevant today?
Sure. So I'm gonna, if anybody listening has been through business school, if you haven't, I'm gonna take you back to school for a second. Michael Porter, the renowned Harvard Business School professor, back in actually 1972, came up with Porter's 5 forces, and it's a fascinating book and an incredible model that a ton of consulting firms have been built on. But in essence, it talks about 5 forces that act on or to put pressure on the competition between rivals at the center of this bullseye, if you will. And the idea is, what are other options do buyers have? Where do suppliers come in? And really, again, forces that act on the competitive nature of different options. So if I'm a member and I have the option of joining several different associations in my field, not only which ones do I join, but which ones do I really participate in? Which ones do I actively or am engaged in? If I can only attend one annual meeting, from a budget or scheduling challenges, which one do I go to? And that's what Porter's 5 forces really focuses on addressing. What Michael Porter didn't have back in the 72 and what's really evolved in the last 40 plus years are disruptive technologies like social, like mobile. Yep. Think about it. Yelp wasn't around. Google, Amazon, a lot of the things that have become really ingrained in our daily lives wasn't available back then. So the whole box that's really, buying the buyer's power and the buyer's ability to identify different options, really gain independent insights into other people's experiences. None of that stuff that heavily impacts our decision making was available back then. So I have an enormous amount of respect for Michael Porter, and there's a lot of really bright folks. Clayton Christensen on innovation is another one that I follow, very closely. But I think if you think about a renewed version of Porter's 5 forces, and something associations should care about, is really the experiences they build for their members. And the days of somebody going away mad and you not caring are long gone, because if they go away mad, they'll blog about it. They may tweet about it. They may share it on Yelp. They may share it on Foursquare. They may, they'll do a lot more than, just tell a handful of people. And the amazing part is, because that information is readily available, any other current or prospective member is going to be able to find that. As such, as associations, you have to get really intentional about making every experience an exceptional one. Now, are you going to be able to make every member happy every time? No, that's unrealistic. Mm-hmm. But it has to be a cultural shift that says the only thing that matters and who we are, what we do, the products and services that we build is that member. And unless we become an expert in all things our members, their likes, dislikes, preferences, tastes, what makes their business grow, what do they need from someone like us, again, you're going to struggle to not just sustain what you're doing, but really grow as an association, as an organization.
Yes. Well, I think this is really good to take note as well, that social is more than just the talking, the interaction, but it is really truly about an experience, and as you say, creating a truly exceptional experience. I think a lot of times people don't make that connection, but it is very important.
Sure.
So, a couple more questions for you on some of the content that's in the book that I'm really interested in. You talk about this impact model. and there's 6 stages in the impact model. Now, it's pretty meaty, but I'd love to see if we can kind of get through a high-level perspective on what impact is and its 6 stages.
Yeah, and on the meaty comment, again, I didn't want to write a fluff piece, and I really wanted to create something that was a conversation starter. And what I'm hoping the audience will do with this book is, take it and share it with their senior leadership team and share it with their board members, and hopefully it will create some discussions in the next board meeting or the next strategy session. But in essence, the impact model, again, the letters stand for acronym for each of those. It starts, and there's 3 buckets. Let me start there. Educate the broader audience, not just your members. And one of the key takeaways for me in interviewing association executives was this delineation between existing dues-paying members and those that are not, and the perception that if we cater to one, we can't cater to the other. And I still don't understand that, but the whole idea is educate a much broader audience in your value add. How is the market better off because of what you do? That's actually one of the questions I asked most association executives that I interviewed, is how are your members better off because of you? And Brian, this may or may not come to you as a surprise, but most start jumping into, well, let me tell you all the things that we do. We got this, we got this, we got this, we got this. And I said, well, that's great, but that's all about you. How are they better off because of you?
Right.
And that's a salient point that a lot of people kind of miss out on. But if you start by educating the broader audience, then you engage them, right, as they become members and as they get involved with the association. How do we engage them to really benefit from not just the value that we're adding, but what value is being perceived, what value is being received, what value is being applied, and what really impacts their business. It impacts them as individuals or organizations. And as you engage them, really then the 3rd bucket, empower them. Empower them to share their experiences. Empower them to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right. One association executive stopped me at a recent speech and said, "Did you just say ugly?" And I said, yeah. Because if you didn't make mistakes, you wouldn't be human, right? Last time I checked, most associations are made up of humans. So it's not that you made a mistake. It's what did you choose to do about it afterwards? Did you sweep it on the rug? Did you ignore it? Did you fess up to it and demonstrate a certain level of transparency and openness that said, you know what, we screwed up. We apologize. Now, here's how we like to fix it, or here's what we like to do, or here's how we can learn from that. So if you think about those 3 buckets, now let me show you how the impact fits in. By educating the market, you immerse them in your broader value add, in conversations, in what I call common mission, common vision, common enemy, right? Too much legislation, wrong kind of legislation. That's a perfect place to immerse the market about why sugar versus other material, why distribution of warehousing versus other models, why whatever your passion, whatever your cause or your mission is. Yeah. But immerse them in the broader topic, broader discussion. Members, without sounding cliche-ish, when you do that, when you add value, when you share your credibility, when you share your expertise, as a member, as a prospective member, I start to see there really is value in membership. There's benefits in that membership, and I create you create this pull, this gravity for people to want to become members. Now, my definition of membership aren't just the dues-paying people. It's, one of the association executives I interviewed, I said, how many members? They said, roughly 10,000. I said, well, how many people touched your website or attended a webinar or downloaded a white paper or any other way engage your brand? He said 600,000. That's a very different number, and that's a much bigger piece of the pie, or forget piece of the pie, bigger pie. No. We can go attract, right? So let them see value in membership. That's exclusive to members. So immerse, member, participate. When they participate, they're demonstrating that they're getting value from whatever it is that you're doing. So you have to learn from each of those touch points, right? Not just did they attend a webinar, but was it relevant to what they were doing? Not just did they download something, but did it help them? Not just did they attend the annual meeting, but how are they better off? What are they taking away to do differently because of it? But the more you create participation, the more that's feedback loop for you to figure out what's working and what doesn't, not with stale surveys that everybody does. I still get surveys from stuff I speak at or I attend, and I'm just not convinced that stale surveys work. So immerse, member, participate. Accredit is the next one. Accreditation has to have market gravity or market pull. Very few people argue with an MBA. Very few question what a PhD is. But your ACXTJK, I'm not sure if anybody recognizes it. And more importantly, is it creating any market demand because I have that accreditation? So if you're going to build accreditation, make sure it's more than just 3 or 4 or 6 letters after somebody's name. But accredit is the other one. Really build accreditation, valuing accreditation. Immerse, member, participate, accredit. Next one is community. Again, just like Sermo is a community. So how can you build an environment, on or offline, by the way, which has to be inline, a community of like-minded people talking about things that not just you think is important, but they believe is instrumental to their success, instrumental to their survival, instrumental to the growth of the industry. So by building a community, and you just, in essence, and in many ways, I want to counsel people, butt out. This isn't about you. It's about you being a purveyor of those interactions. It's you becoming, a facilitator of those relationships. So community, and the last one is transform. Only when you transform their lives, only when they're better off because of you, is when they will educate the market for you. That's when they'll join formal and informal mentoring programs. That's when they will, want to join committees and boards. And I talk about governance councils and other ways to make sure that rising tides, help everybody. But that's what the impact model stands for. Perfect.
Now, the question that comes to mind after walking through that with you is, do you have any examples or stories of association clients that you've worked with, or associations in general that have taken this material, this model, and have begun, thinking about how to shape their strategy? Any stories that you can share along those lines?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, what thinking and leading differently, in essence, not just reading this book, but putting it in practice takes, is first and foremost is a visionary leader. And one of the ones that I met this past year is a great lady named Kimberly Corbin. Kim is a former CEO of the National Black MBA Association. And she heard me speak about this at the 5-star gathering, the ASAE 5-star event. She comes up to me afterwards, gives me a card and says, we have to become more member-centric. If we're going to, and by the way, this is an association that's 40 plus years old, done some really amazing things in really advancing the cause of black professionals. And they have an annual conference that does really well. So for all intents and purposes, the organization was doing well. Kim's vision was, we have to raise the bar. And what we've done today cannot be what we continue to do moving forward. So I worked with Kim and her senior leadership team. And what she did was, in terms of their strategy, their vision, their focus, she started to develop with her leadership team this, and it really is an evolution, this evolutionary plan that says just that. We're going to become a lot more in depth, a lot more of an expert, a lot more focused on our members. And as I said, that life cycle, right? So a MBA student who joins a academic chapter, how do we, support them, for them that when they leave, join, become an entry-level professional? Then what do they need at mid-level? What do they need as kind of once they start getting into leadership? And what do they need as senior executives? And as you can imagine, appreciate, as that association, that member needs very different things at very different levels. And we started working together on how do we now start aligning what does National Black MBA Association bring to its members at each of those stages. And as you can appreciate, it's not the same thing. Executive professionals need something very level than entry level does.
Right.
Yet the association treat them as one size fits all. And in the book I talk about, if you believe in this impact model, if you believe in this member-centric model, you have to start by building a very different organization. So going from traditional silos of membership and marketing and events and programs and products and to now building it around that member. Now start thinking about, and they had a multi-tier membership model where you joined the local and regional and national. And so if that local chapter is the touch point that members really get the most value from, how do we empower that local chapter to really deliver the best possible experience they can? And then when they come to the national conference, how do we make sure we segment, we build programs by those life cycles, and we really help them understand where they are and where they're trying to move to, and build content very specific to that life cycle. Bring in sponsors very specific to the life cycle, and really help them see that transformation. Create environments where they are not just incrementally but dramatically better off because of us. Things like scholarships and things like the entrepreneurial summit, and a lot of ideas to help move them along that continuum. So Kim is a perfect example. I'm working with another healthcare client right now. We're going through the exact same, that identifying the member profile, identifying the life cycle, and then segmenting, where they are. So there's several examples. Every one of them starts really with a visionary leader. Starts with somebody who understands. We don't want to keep defending the status quo. It's really time to challenge it and start thinking differently, again, about what it means to be an association, what it means to belong to an association, and how are they better off because of that relationship.
Great. Well, one last question for you. This is around the concept of Itofication. I want to hear you talk a little bit about that, what that means to you, and why it's important for an association to kind of understand this particular concept.
Sure. I don't know if I mentioned, but the whole idea for this book came from John Graham. Again, kudos to ASAE. John sat in one of my sessions. We met in his office. He initially said, I think this could be an interesting paper. As I met with Monica and Keith and those guys, they said, we think this could be a book. And the reason they were interested in me doing this is because I don't live in, breathe inside the association world. A lot of my clients are corporate or even academic. I speak at several academic forums. So I think that independent perspective was of real interest and value to them. And one of the perspectives that I brought to this idea of was this iTunify your capabilities. And by that I mean, most of your audience members at some point, either for themselves or for somebody else, they bought an Apple product. And if you bought an Apple product, you're experiencing getting a user's guide or a user's manual, an interesting one. Apple used to ship out, printed user's guide like you get with a lot of products. Then this is a couple years ago, they shipped out 100,000 products, right? This is a company that ships millions of products, but they shipped 100,000 products without a user's guide. Interesting part is 3 people complained. Wait, it verifies that you'll never make everybody happy, so don't try. Some of your members, sorry to say, wake up on the wrong side of the bed every day. Okay, but what dawned on Apple is that we buy cars, we buy our vehicles, and we don't go through the owner's manual, much less a fairly intuitive digital device. So they saved $2.2 billion by not printing and shipping out user's guide or user's manuals, and putting all that online. Now think about it. A, you're giving your target audience a lot less of what they don't need and a lot more of what they want, which is now that user's manual is online. And now because it's online, I'm not just putting the printed text on. I can add animation. I can add videos. I can add links to websites. I can make that touch point smart, not just dumb. Right. And more, I can update it as the technology updates. So I don't have to reprint this thing every time I go to a new model and have you be sitting on 15 of these things at some point. So now take that from the corporate world and bring it to the association world. What do so many associations, you and I both know, and your audience can relate to this as well, are doing things that they think it's cool, or 3 members get a ton of value, but the rest really don't want or need. right? And the easiest one for me to pick on is the magazine, right? Is there great content in that magazine? Absolutely.
Right.
To print it out, go through all the process to create the content or original content and interviews. God bless them. Yes, great stuff. I can show you. There's literally 50 magazines on my desk here. And do I want to read the association one? I belong to several associations as well. Do I want to read theirs? Sure. Do I get a chance to? Typically not. You know where it goes to? The recycle bin.
Yep.
So and if magazine isn't your thing, come up with other facets of your association that you're doing that isn't the highest value for its intended recipients. Not one. So realizing is the first step. 2 is, how could you do it differently? Notice I didn't say better. Better is incrementalism. Better is, how can we do it just a little bit better? I'm talking about doing it dramatically differently, and that's real innovation. So taking this printed, user's guide that it's stale and it doesn't give you any interactivity online is first step. Making it much more interactive, much more updated, much more engaging is a bigger step. Here's a third one. How can you now learn from that interaction? Right? So I'm pretty much willing to bet your members don't click on articles because they're bored. They click on them because it's relevant. They click on it because they find it interesting. They click on it because it's a real pain or an issue or a challenge or an opportunity. I don't believe everybody's damaged. It could be an opportunity they want to take advantage of. In that printed magazine, you have very little visibility to that. That online, when you create that interactivity online, when you attach a blog or a discussion forum or now some YouTube videos from your members to that article or to that issue, now you have that smart, intelligent age of connected relationships working for you if you're savvy enough to learn from it and apply that to the next issue or the next thing that you do.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for doing this interview, and thank you to everyone for watching. Be sure to sign up today in the upper right corner of this website to be updated via email when new interviews are posted. Also, follow @BrianKellyNow on Twitter to stay on top of all things Association Mavens related. Lastly, please submit your recommendation for which Association Maven you'd like to see interviewed next. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to bringing you more great interviews. Bye-bye.